Backstreet Boys sold over 100 million records. But when each member walked away, they only had $300,000 in their bank account. Their manager, Lou Pearlman, took the rest. And what he did was completely legal. That is not an isolated incident. It is not a story about one bad manager. It is a pattern that has been running inside the music industry since the 1950s. And in this video, we are going to show you exactly how it works. The laws have changed. The contracts have evolved. The dollar amounts have grown, but in every decade, in every era, someone has found a way to sit across from a talented person at the beginning of their career and walk away with the better end of the deal. This is the story of how they did it. To understand how Lou Pearlman pulled this off and how people have been pulling versions of it off for decades, you need to understand one thing. The master recording copyright. It sounds technical, it is not complicated. Here is what it means. When a label finances a recording session, they own the master, the final recorded version of the song. The specific take that lives on streaming platforms, gets licensed to films, is used in commercials, and generates money in every form imaginable for the rest of time. The artist performed it, the label owns it. That single distinction is the reason why Elvis Presley, who sold over 1 billion records across his lifetime, died with less than $1 million to his name, while his manager was sitting on a fortune built entirely from Elvis's work. It is the reason why the Beatles watched their own songs get sold from company to company for 50 years, eventually landing at Sony for an estimated $750 million, while Paul McCartney has spent decades fighting to get them back. It is the reason why Taylor Swift, one of the most commercially successful artists alive, had to spend 4 years re-recording her own albums from scratch just to own a version of her own music. And it is made possible by one clause that sits quietly inside almost every first recording contract ever signed. Not the royalty rate, not the advance, the boilerplate, the paragraph most people skim past. In various forms, it reads something like this. The manager or label is granted exclusive rights to negotiate on the artist's behalf in all commercial transactions, with no obligation to disclose competing offers or the full financial terms of any agreement. Once you sign it, the person across the table controls what you know about your own career. They decide which offers reach you. They have no legal obligation to tell you what they turned down on your behalf or why. One clause. Every story in this video runs through it. Colonel Tom Parker was a carnival man, someone who had spent his career finding things people wanted and positioning himself to profit from them before anyone else understood what they were worth. In 1955, what he found was Elvis Presley. Elvis was a 20-year-old truck driver from Memphis who could walk into a room and make everyone in it forget what they had been thinking about. Parker recognized it immediately and spent the next year maneuvering himself into the role of Elvis's exclusive manager, handing him a contract that gave Parker complete control over every commercial decision in Elvis's career, with no obligation to ever show his client the full financial terms of any deal he made on his behalf. Elvis was 20 years old. He had never seen a contract in his life. He trusted the Colonel completely. What followed was one of the most successful careers in the history of entertainment. Elvis sold over 1 billion records across his lifetime. He starred in 33 films. He performed to sold-out crowds across America for 2 decades. Elvis's 1973 concert, Aloha from Hawaii, was broadcast via satellite to an estimated 1.5 billion viewers worldwide, the largest audience for any entertainment event in history at that point. By any reasonable measure, Elvis Presley should have died one of the wealthiest entertainers who ever lived, but instead, he died with approximately $5 million to his name. Where did the bulk of his money go? To the Colonel. But how? Parker's commission had started at 25%, nearly double the industry standard, and had climbed to 50% by the end of Elvis's career. Half of everything Elvis generated went directly to his manager. But the commission was almost secondary to what Parker was doing behind the scenes. By the early 1970s, Parker had accumulated approximately $30 million in gambling debts to the Las Vegas Hilton. His solution was to sign Elvis to a residency at the same hotel with multiple shows per day, 7 days a week, for months at a time. Not because it served Elvis's career, not because Elvis wanted it, because Parker needed the cash flow to service his own debts, and the contract gave him the power to make it happen without asking. Elvis spent those years overworked, isolated, and physically falling apart. The shows kept getting booked, the money kept flowing to Parker, and Elvis never said no, not because he did not want to, because he trusted the Colonel, the same way he had trusted him since he was 20 years old. Elvis died at Graceland in 1977 at the age of 42. But before that, in 1973, Parker had made one final move. He negotiated the sale of the rights to Elvis's 700 recorded songs back to RCA Victor. Every recording, everything Elvis had built across 20 years of his career. Parker received $6.2 million from that transaction. Elvis received $4.6 million. His own manager walked away with more money from the sale of Elvis's life's work than Elvis did. A court investigator later found that Parker had been defrauding the estate for years. The estate sued. They settled. By the time it was over, Parker had extracted a fortune from a man who trusted him completely and used most of it to pay off casino debts. The clause that made all of it possible outlived Elvis by decades. Not every manager in this story was trying to steal from their artists. Some of the most damaging deals in music history were made by people who genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. Brian Epstein was a 27-year-old record shop owner in Liverpool when he first saw the Beatles perform in a basement club in 1961. He had no management experience, no industry connections, no real idea what he was doing, but he believed in them completely. Within a year, he had secured them a deal with EMI. Within 3 years, they were the biggest act in the world. The Beatles went on to sell over 600 million records, making them the best-selling music act in history. By any measure, Epstein had delivered exactly what he promised. But here is what happened to the money those songs would generate. In 1963, Epstein advised Lennon and McCartney into a publishing deal with a music publisher named Dick James. The deal put publishing rights into a company controlled by James and his partner. Publishing rights are different from master recording rights. They cover the underlying composition itself, the melody and lyrics. Every time a song gets played on radio, used in a film, streamed, or covered by another artist, the publishing rights owner collects. For a songwriter, publishing rights are generational wealth. Epstein structured the deal so that Dick James and his partner received 50% of the company holding those rights. Lennon and McCartney received 20% each. It seemed reasonable at the time. Epstein thought he was getting his clients a fair arrangement. But then, in 1969, the company was sold. Lennon and McCartney were minority shareholders. They did not have the votes to stop it. They watched their own songs get sold to the highest bidder, and there was nothing they could do about it. In 1985, Michael Jackson purchased the catalog for $47.5 million. He had been advised the songs were undervalued. He was right. Sony now controls it. The estimated current value is $750 million. Paul McCartney has spent decades trying to buy back songs he wrote as a teenager in Liverpool. Those songs made other people hundreds of millions of dollars. Epstein never meant for any of this to happen. He died in 1967 at 32 years old, before he could see where the deal he made was heading. But here is the thing that makes this story more unsettling than the Parker story. Parker was greedy. Parker was exploitative. Parker knew exactly what he was doing. Epstein was none of those things, and the outcome was the same. The clause does not require malice to function. It just requires a signature. Parker, Epstein, Pearlman, 3 different managers, 3 different eras, 3 completely different personalities and intentions, but they all used the same clause. The manager or label is granted exclusive rights to negotiate on the artist's behalf in all commercial transactions, with no obligation to disclose competing offers or the full financial terms of any agreement. Parker used it to sell Elvis's 700 songs to RCA without Elvis understanding what he was giving away. Elvis received $4.6 million. Parker received $6.2 million from the same deal. Epstein used the functional equivalent to structure a publishing deal that handed majority control of the Beatles' compositions to a man they barely knew. 60 years later, that catalog is worth $750 million to Sony. Pearlman used it as the sixth member clause, taking a cut of earnings his artists were not even allowed to see the full accounting of. You might think that by 2006, artists had figured this out. They had not. That year, a 15-year-old girl from Nashville signed her first recording contract with a label called Big Machine Records, standard industry terms, the same standard terms that had been in use in various forms since 1956. Her name was Taylor Swift. That contract gave Swift no right of first refusal if the label was ever sold. No requirement to notify her before any transaction involving her catalog closed. No access to the financial terms of any deal involving her recordings until it was announced publicly. In June 2019, a music manager named Scooter Braun purchased Big Machine Label Group. Inside that acquisition were the master recordings of everything Swift had recorded between the ages of 15 and 23, her first 6 albums. The masters were central to the deal. Swift learned about the purchase from a press release on the day it was announced, the same day as everyone else. Press release is how she found out, along with the public. But here is where it gets interesting. Braun held those masters for 17 months. 17 months. Then he sold them to a private equity firm called Shamrock Capital. The confirmed total was $405 million. $405 million. He had paid approximately $140 million for Swift's portion of the catalog. The confirmed profit on a single asset transaction in 17 months was $265 million. That profit is the key fact. A 15-year-old in Nashville in 2006 signed the same clause as a 20-year-old in Memphis in 1956. 50 years apart, different names, different numbers, same outcome. When Scooter Braun bought those masters, he was not just buying recordings, he was buying control. Control over where Swift's music appeared, how it was used, and who profited from it. Every sync deal for a film, every commercial, every time a streaming platform featured one of her songs, all of it now required his approval. All of it now generated money for him. And there was nothing Swift could do to stop it. She could not buy the masters back. Braun was not selling them to her. She had no right of first refusal under her contract. She had no legal mechanism to block the sale or challenge the ownership. The contract she had signed at 15 had closed every door available to her, except one. She owned the compositions, the melodies, the lyrics, everything she had written, and buried in copyright law was a provision that allowed an artist to re-record their own songs after a certain period had passed. So that is exactly what she did. She went back into the studio and re-recorded 6 complete albums from scratch. Every song, every track. Then she turned to the largest and most loyal fan base in the music industry and made them a straightforward proposition. Stop streaming the originals. Stream these instead. The industry thought it was a stunt. Braun told investors the re-recordings would actually drive more attention to the originals. By 2022, Red Taylor's version was generating 961 million on-demand streams in the United States. The original Red was generating 254 million. Swift had redirected nearly 80% of her own audience away from the masters Braun controlled. She systematically drained the value from an asset he had paid $400 million for. It did not get her money back. It did not undo the deal. Braun still walked away with $265 million in profit. But it changed something. A generation of artists watched what Swift did and started asking questions they had never thought to ask before. Olivia Rodrigo negotiated ownership of her masters before signing her first deal. Kelly Clarkson began re-recording her own catalog. Bryan Adams did the same. Music attorneys started fielding calls from young artists who had seen what a bad contract could cost and wanted to know what was in theirs. In May 2025, Swift purchased her original masters from Shamrock Capital for approximately $360 million. She finally owns everything she recorded between 15 and 27. She got there eventually. Most artists never do. Here is the version of this story the music industry prefers. These were isolated cases, unfortunate individuals who took things too far. The industry has learned from them. Things are better now. But that version does not explain why the same clause appears in a contract from 1956 and a contract from 2006. It does not explain why four people with completely different backgrounds, motivations, and methods all ended up using the same legal instrument to extract wealth from the people who generated it. The accurate version is simpler and less comfortable. The music industry was built on a legal architecture that transfers power from the person who creates the value to the person who finances the recording of it. That architecture has never been fundamentally dismantled because the people with the power to change it are the same people who benefit from it. The laws have changed, the contracts have evolved, and in every generation, someone new sits down across from a talented person at the beginning of their career, someone who is young and grateful and has never seen a contract before, and then slides a piece of paper across the table. The clause is still in it. Not because they are uniquely villainous, the contract lets them.